Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So today's video, I'm going to show you how to work through a couple poses, and this one's going to be more centrally focused around actually editing the pose. So starting with a pose and then, trying to make edits to really work through it. So this is for more drawing from the imagination than studying. I do recommend that you study from figure drawing as much as possible. I've actually been doing a lot more of that lately, and it does help you to solidify this information in your mind. But for comics, like a lot of us like to do that probably watch this channel and come here, drawing from the mind is very important. And so it's kind of a hybrid of drawing from life and then mixing up your various style with what the human body to function like. So what's helpful about this part is when you get a pose in place and it's almost there, but it's not quite exactly what you're looking for. You've got to be able to turn objects in your mind, and that's kind of what I want to discuss today. So we'll work on this. It sometimes can be tricky to do. It's not always the most easy experience, and I think the reason for that is because we have such a imagination about us and what we'd like to see, but it doesn't. But we also have this ability to see flaws very easily. Even somebody that's not artistic can take one look at something and go, well, something's not right with that picture. So it's mixing that all together to get something that looks dynamic and fun and cool, but then has a certain correctness about it. So with this pose, obviously the shoulders are very wide and the character's head's a little small and stuff like that. That's all fine. This is very stylized. But one thing I want to show you, it's real easy to get in the habit of doing this here and putting the arms really wide. Now, if the character's maybe jumping down from a building or something like that, then maybe that would make sense. But for most poses, it probably wouldn't be that way. And you want a bit of asymmetrical value to even a pose like this. So this shoulder may be a lot less in focus or visible area. Depends really. And actually, I'm just now noticing the head needs to be placed a little bit further over, like this, a little bit larger, maybe a tilt. All these little tiny changes will help you get a little bit closer. I always do that. Excuse me, gotta get to the eraser here. All these little tiny incremental changes are really important to refining the character, especially when drawing from the imagination. Okay, so now what I want to do is, instead of, like I said, my force of habit makes me want to draw the arm way out there. And it's not necessarily incorrect to do that, but let's try hiding the upper part of the arm quite a bit more to where you get just a little bit of that bicep, maybe right there. And then we'll bring the forearm out like this. And I'll start with a real basic cylinder-like shape just to kind of place it like that and kind of test it. So if you use these really primitive shapes in the beginning, it not only saves you time, it allows you to see it more clearly. You're not immediately drawing in anatomy and trying to go, here's the muscle, here's the wrist, here's the muscle to the wrist, and the lower forearm. If you get too quick into doing that, it becomes harder to figure out the pose. So start with the very basic shapes, get them all into place, see how they work, and you can see now that this arm will look a lot more closer to camera because we've tucked that other arm back. So that's kind of what I was going for. This seems to be working decently well enough. Now, another tricky part is how to place the fist. So whenever you're connecting the fist to the wrist here, it always gets tricky because I think the first thing we want to do is just block it in and throw the thumb right there. And although that might work in this particular pose, the way that the arm is angled pretty far down, in a lot of poses you'll notice, especially if you start taking your own photos and again drawing from life, you'll notice that a lot of times from even an angle like this, the fist will actually look to be almost floating in front of the wrist. It'll look to be almost segmented because it tilts and it's larger than the wrist, so it really quickly blocks the entirety of the wrist where it connects. So it's little things like that that you have to notice to get it right. If not, again, that ability to quickly see something that's not correct will jump out and smack you in the face and go, well, this isn't a good pose. So it can be sometimes as simple as just a placement or an overlap of a muscle or a body part. to make it work or not work. Okay, so now this abdomen looks pretty straight up and down, and we need to, really needed to rough out the pose a bit more. And actually this looks a little bit too straight. Let's go ahead and just tilt that a bit. So I'm just going to keep moving stuff around because I really want to show you how maneuvering your work can save a pose and can sometimes become a really great pose. Like it's actually one of the things that I've been focusing on more with my work is to not give up on a piece unless I absolutely have to, unless I really just see it's a waste of time. I persevere through it and I try to figure out what exactly is wrong with it. And there's lots of ways to do that, so I'll try to show you some of those. So now another tricky part, and people have expressed this on the channel here, is how to connect the pelvic to the waist. And this is always a complex area, mainly because I think that our first instinct is to draw it straight down like this. And there's a bit of tilt there, and that might be enough tilt, but we tend to, like, when we're drawing it from a straight on shot, we always draw the pelvic like this, the waist here, the legs here, and it's very straight up and down and very stick man and static and boring. And we forget that the hips twist, the waist twist right here, obviously, it tilts. It's got a lot of flexibility from the abdomen to the way it connects here, so it's good to draw this curvature line like this. You can draw it all the way down the body. You can picture where the spine is through the back. That's all a good visual representation to make you see that the body is not just straight up and down. And then past that, the other tricky part is the way that it connects. You've got a little bit of the oblique that comes out to the side. Now, we like to draw superheroes, so we don't give them very much love handles, but they're there, so you still got to kind of get them in there. You don't have to make them very apparent, but you need to be aware that they're there. So what ends up happening is it comes down to the side, the oblique, the hip, where it connects to the leg, it starts to come back out. So there's all these little subtle bends in there. This is like the oblique and the connection to the leg and the pelvic. So if you start to memorize those shapes, even though they're not very prevalent in your pose, just the mere resemblance of them being in there will kind of make a big difference. And it just keeps you from drawing too straight up and down, I think. Okay, so now let's bring this one leg up. We'll just put a knee somewhere in here. We don't know where that's at yet. And then we'll bring this leg over, give it a bit, try to make the pose a bit more dynamic. So we'll bring this leg over this way a bit, and we'll just draw these in with a couple big ovals, really, just to get started. And again, none of this is concrete. I can move things around. I'm constantly analyzing it and seeing where I can kind of sculpt the pose. And let's scale this down a bit more, just to give me a little more real estate. Okay, so now another tricky part everybody expresses, and I can attest to this too, is the connection from the leg to the knee to the lower part of the leg, which I just kind of consider the lower part of the leg like the forearm, but the forearm to the leg. I know it sounds silly, but it's kind of the way I envision it to draw the connections. So every time a part of the body comes in and connects, it tapers in like this, somewhere in there. Actually, it's usually lower here. You've got this muscle a little higher, something like this. So it tapers inward. You've got this large segment for the knee, and the knee isn't just like this, as easy as that is to draw. And this is what I'm always predisposed to wanting to do right here, is draw a kneecap that looks like this, draw some muscle around it, and I picture the bone like this. And although I can kind of piece it together and maybe make something that looks somewhat like a knee, it's not really how a knee looks. It's too blocky and segmented and all that. Realistically, a knee looks a lot more like this, where it's kind of bulges around the knee, and it's a lot softer looking than this over here. But again, we are drawing comics and we are stylizing. It's good to be aware of what it really looks like. Get a bigger eraser. I'll be erasing here for days. And then stylize it from there. So again, this is, drawing from figure drawing. But then, the tough part is when you are drawing from figure drawing and from life, it's like, well, good luck finding this particular pose. So that's where you start taking your own shots. But, if you're like me, you don't necessarily look like this guy, or this character, whatever. So you have to learn to change what you're looking at and make it look superhero-esque and stylized and all that fun stuff. And it happens with practice, and maybe in turn it'll make you want to work out a little bit more and get a bit more buff for your photos. Who knows? So maybe it can serve a couple purposes. But with the knee, it generally will come out and kind of bend around, and we got to figure out where the lower leg is going. So if we go like this and we bring the leg straight down, that's one way to do it. Obviously, we could have the leg straight back. Probably would match this particular type of pose a little bit better. But the other thing that we have to start trying to focus on when we draw this stuff is just how far it's going. Okay, for instance, if I draw it down like this, it could end up here, here, here. It could rotate a little bit. The pivot of the hip joint will allow the leg to move across and around like this. It could tuck all the way back to here. So you have to figure out where it's going to go in relationship to this, and then you have to draw that basic shape, we'll say to here, and it has to narrow down perspectively till it gets to that point. And this is the part you start realizing when you do lots of figure drawing, because it forces you to realize how much the body does shift and shape as it foreshortens. It would actually foreshorten a lot more than this even. You might end up with a little foot or something back here. And I think for imaginative drawing, we forget that a lot, and we just draw everything kind of full scale in this 2D plane. So it's really helpful to start realizing that things taper quite a bit, that they get a lot smaller as they recede away from space or from camera or the viewer, however you want to classify that. So that's where figure drawing is going to kind of hone your visualization process with all that. Okay, so even that looks a little funky. Let's figure out where this leg is going first, because I might get lucky and be able to just cover that. But I'll probably shift the. In fact, I'm not gonna just hope I cover it. Let me erase this back. That knee looks really weird too, so I want to fix that. So this part of the leg, this muscle, can't remember. I think it's the Rectus Femoris or something, but I'm probably wrong there. But anyways, it comes in front like that. It's pretty large, and then this one comes over and it tapers down quicker and more abruptly than this side. So from the outside of the leg, it looks like this. Inside the leg, it looks like this. Not as dramatic. The Rectus Femoris, if I got that right, goes through here. Something like this. It's just, just pay attention that there is an angle there and a taper. So even from an angle like this, it's got to be evident. Even if it's only slightly, it's just got to be somewhat evident. So let's get these lower parts of the leg in first. And I want to say from the hip to the knee is generally from the pelvic to the shoulder. Somewhere in that area. Again, we're working stylized, so you could change that altogether, but it's good to be aware of what it is, and then you can make adjustments from there. Alright, so let's bring this leg down perspectively. So we'll do some kind of perspective guides. I want the foot to end up here somewhere, roundabout. And a big problem I see with a lot of illustrations when they go to do this part of the leg is they will do either the leg even on both sides. So the lower part of the leg, let me bring this up so I got something to illustrate on. So they'll go to draw the leg and they'll do something like this, where it's like almost identical on both sides, not quite that angle or whatever. And it's quite different from that. The leg comes out. It looks like a longer elongated curve here. And then this part of the knee comes in like this. This part comes out and back in very abruptly. And then this muscle and the ankle, and then the ankles, I always get this wrong. Is it up? Well, it's opposite of this, I think. So I think the inner ankle is higher, or part of the ankle that you see is higher. Something like that. I'm not looking at reference, and my memory is failing me right now, but something like that. But the main thing about the calf is that the inside is different than the outside, pretty dramatically, really. I've got this looking a bit too defined like that. So something like that. So and like I say in a lot of my videos, if you have a tough time, look at reference. Then also draw something flat, straight on, or profile, whatever you're most comfortable with. Get the information in place, and then use that as a visual guide to come over here and draw it with a bit more confidence. Okay, so let's scale this dude down a bit like this. Alright, so now let's go back to this leg and try to get it in place. Let's figure out which way the foot's going. Now the foot generally lines up with the knee. It can turn a little bit, but I believe as you turn your foot, your knee goes with it. So we want that to pretty much be going in the same direction. We'll have it pointing down a bit, like he's jumping down. What is it, higher on the inside? So something like that. It looks a bit awkward. We'll try to fix that. And then let's take this leg and let's figure out where this is going to go. So again, it's real easy to just go right there with it, but it's not going to look very dynamic. It's going to look pretty static. Now, if he is jumping down, then it might make sense that it's right about there, but let's try to make it look a touch more dynamic and bring it back like this, and the foot out to here like this. So I think that looks a little more interesting. We could go full tilt with it and bring it way back here. So I'll draw through it a bit darker to see. Yeah, and I think that does look a bit more dynamic, so we'll go with the latter of the two. So erase this back. And you see my sketch gets pretty murky, pretty, pretty sketchy. But this is how I work through stuff. This is how I try to visualize it, and I move things around. And I might do 4 or 5 of these before I get it right and settle on, an exact pose or something. But I try to do as much edit work in this one design as I can, because I feel it saves time and I don't waste anything. I think that this is a salvageable sketch, even though there's some clear flaws to it. That's okay. The other thing I want to touch on, because I always get people. They'll say on the channel here, they'll say things like, how do I get better? And I don't think my work's good enough, and things like that. You just make your work good enough for today. Get your stuff done. Make it look as good as you can today. You're always going to be able to go back and revisit your work. You're always going to learn new techniques and be able to, revisit a piece and do a redraw. So just do it as good as you can today. Don't get too caught up in. For one, don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to my work. I don't compare myself to people that I think are amazing, like all the 90s comic guys that I like and all that stuff. I love their work. I study it often, but I don't compare myself as in the idea of like, where were they at their age and how good were they at this time. And, there's just too much negativity involved in that. All you can do is be better than you were the day before, and that kind of thing. If you focus more on that, you're always going to be getting better, and you're never going to focus too much on a negative view of where you're at in comparison to somebody else. So try not to do that. Just improve your work as much as you can each day and continually make the work. That's the biggest thing. As long as you don't stop making it, you'll get as good as you want to get. That's the key thing, I think. I mean, unless you just have really unrealistic expectations of your work, but that's up to you, So, all right. So now let's soft erase this back, and I can at this stage. Let me actually fix some of the proportion issues, because he's got this really huge leg going on. So let's do this. Let's scale it down. One of the things that helps me see proportion issues is scaling down something really far and then mirroring it. So let me do that. It's still in a rough sketch, where that's rough sketch stage. Basically combine those words together. I don't know how I did that. Edit, or is it image? Sorry, you guys aren't seeing the software, so I probably shouldn't ramble about what tools I'm using there. Okay, so yeah, the leg just looks a bit large. So what I'm going to do is just take the upper body and scale it up a bit. And what I'll tend to do is when I do things like this, I'll also play around with the tilt a bit. It's like I feel like if I'm already here editing the work, I might as well see what it looks like in a couple different edits. If I could tilt it real quick. And keep in mind, if you're working traditionally, you're just going to do this with the light table. This is very doable with traditional tools. In fact, I try to work as traditional as I can whenever I'm doing any of these drawings. Let's raise that head up a little bit. And, you know, the foot looks small back here, but I'll wait to change that because that's probably part of the foreshortening. The leg entirely, maybe could be a little bigger. Let's see. Again, I can play with the tilt of it, move it around a bit. And I do think the lower part of the leg needs to be larger. But again, I want to be aware that it might look good when it's rendered as far as foreshortening. You know, because you always want that little bit of a difference. Like, if you look at this prospectively, what's supposed to be going on here is this leg would be coming out a little bit like this. It'd be going down prospectively like this a little bit. This leg would be going back prospectively like this. The torso would be going down prospectively like this. That's why you're seeing the top of the shoulders. So you just want to kind of visualize all this stuff prospectively, and the limbs each go in different directions, so they're going to be able to take on their own perspective drawing in a sense. So let's go ahead and scale that back up. All right, so now I'll go ahead and do another soft erase and a kind of a redraw over top and see if I can salvage this pretty rough pose. So now it goes to more of the rope drawing, where I think a little bit more about the anatomy. And, you know, if you keep in mind too, you may need to practice a bit more before you can just jump right to this stage. You might need a couple stages to work up to this. I've been drawing for quite a long time, so I should be able to see through and draw off a pretty rough sketch at this stage. But not to say I'll be able to. Sometimes I have to go back to the drawing board and keep trying. And I don't know where the muscles would fall right there. I'll just say something like this. This won't be an entirely illustrated pose, but get the idea. And the collarbones would actually have more of an angle right here, somewhat. So to me, this is just a fun way to kind of work through the pose and come up with something hopefully interesting. And then, you know, if you do enough of these and then you just log a bunch of them, I've got like hundreds of these saved now, and I just, you know, reference them. And some of them you look back at and you're like, whoa, that's not as good as I thought it was. And other ones you're like, you know, still decently satisfied with. But it's all good food for thought. It's all just good to kind of revisit your work like this and see where you're at with your poses and your understanding of the body. You know, and keep in mind too, at this part, you can still, at this stage, you can pull up a shot of a character, and even though they're not at this exact pose, you can still extrapolate some of that information and incorporate it into your sketch. So that's where reference can be a guide. It doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to trace your reference to use it. And also, just so you know, there's nothing wrong with tracing. If you don't believe me, just look it up for like you know, famous artists and things like that. You'd be amazed at the people that actually were wholeheartedly into tracing and projections and all that. Kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I always kind of had that stigma about, you know, oh, tracing is bad or something. But I think what it is that you only want to trace, at least the way I look at it, you only want to trace to kind of learn, to study, and, you know, then you want to draw from your mind. You know, it seems to be more natural, at least for the way that I typically draw. And I think it's a sense of pride, you know, as well. But it's not a bad thing if you need that, and especially to help you on the days that you're maybe not getting it, or you're not feeling as up to snuff on your drawing or whatever, then it might just mean that you need to go back and study a little bit more. And tracing is a great way to study. It really is. Like, it forces you to kind of see something that maybe you're missing. And with the body, that's so easy to do, because the body's just so complex. So many little subtleties in the curves and things like that. And, you know, like this right here, I know I'm not getting this entirely right. I'm just trying to get it as right as I can for my own particular style and what I want to see. But, you know, I know darn well if I was to find somebody actually doing this pose it'd be like, whoa, you know, all kinds of mistakes, whatever, but I'm okay with that. That is okay in my book. But yeah, just trying to get enough of this in place and, you know, figure out some of these shapes, some of the segments in the muscles. I know I like to do this little thing where the chest, you see the chest separation right there. You know, I like to think of the chest bulkier at the sides, which it is, and it thins out as it connects to the center of the solar plex, sternum, whatever. Then this leg I want to try to fix because it looks really weird. I always get this weird look right here that I've got to work on. And I think what it is because the knee actually will get pretty blocky right here, and then it will cut back. So I don't know how to explain it, but this muscle will sit to the side of it. It'll go up like this. This Rectus Femoris. I'm going to feel really silly if I've been getting that wrong this whole video, but I believe that's what it's called. And the leg needs to be thicker right there. Quite a bit thicker. And then this is where this part's starting to look pretty weak, you know, this part of the leg. I think this muscle would come down more like this. I think this foot would overall be larger. I'll just go ahead and change it, and that looks awkward. So let me figure out what I did wrong there. I think it's the connection of the foot would be lower. Darn feet. I have to go back and practice these again, apparently. And I'll just keep moving things around. So this is the part where I try to think of it as much like clay or something. Like not that I'm just drawing it and maybe messing up, and that I can just kind of keep molding it and keep moving things around until I see something that's more correct, because it looks a little awkward. It's probably because I'm creating a tangent here by putting it right against the leg, which I always seem to do. So let's do this. I think I'm forcing myself to line it up to that part of the leg because, you know, visually I'm seeing this line right here. So let's just try to picture this leg isn't there and see if maybe it needs to be a bit more just hidden. Let's try that. Almost makes it worse. I don't want to move that leg just to fix it, so let me try. Yeah, let me just try doing that. Let me just tuck it back there. So the calf muscle I think would be like larger right there. Taper down, and maybe the foot just behind that other leg. Does that look weird? And let's have it. And we'll put this all in shadow. Because, you know, whenever you can't figure something out, you just start shading it. That's what I do anyways. Like that. And then you can shade the inner parts of the connections a little bit. So like I'll usually do like a little bit of shading, if not a lot of shading, under the knee, under here, the area where the foot comes out, because what it does, it helps to make it look like this isn't a straight line going down, that the muscle comes down and then the foot comes out a little bit. Same thing with the pelvic. You could shade this all in, at least a little bit. So what happens is it influences the way the legs come out, and then also the way that the abdomen comes up. So by, you know, shading some of these areas, you push them back. Oh, and let's get his fist in here. Something I've been trying to focus on more with fists is the fanning of the fist. Noticed that in my work from this previous year. I was having a really bad problem with making the fist look too straight across, too square. Again, you can put that fist right in front of the wrists here. Actually, that's too large, but it would block the wrist from this angle, I think. But yeah, so the fingers always fan. So if you notice, I did them like this, not like this, which is what I was having a really bad problem with this year. So hopefully I'll get past that. Or hopefully I am past that. So we'll just shade his eyes and make him look pretty mean. A little shadow under the nose, the lip. That's pretty rough, but you know what I'm getting at there. This is more, again, just more of a sketch to kind of get the pose in place. I would just go back and keep refining it to do something hopefully cool, and then I can start, you know, getting in some suit markings and figuring out what type of character this is. Maybe he has a cape or something. He looks like he's flying, so we can get some of that in there, and you know, so on and so forth. Give him a gem of power. Oh man, it kind of looks like Vision a little bit, or a lot of bit. So yeah, but that's essentially, you know, another work through of a pose. Now, is it a great pose? No. You know, could it be a lot better? Heck yeah, you know. But it does get another pose in place, all drawn from the mind, not looking at any reference. Now, it could be a lot better with reference, so I might go back and check the pose with any kind of reference that I can find that's similar. But I'm really a firm believer that you don't want to waste too much time searching for the right pictures. You know, don't get into that whole Google thing where you're Googling for the right pose, and you know, if anything, you would probably save more time by like grabbing just the right arm or arms and leg and trying to assemble it and Frankenstein your pose together or something. I don't know, but really, I think what happens is you're better off just studying figure drawing, getting better at drawing that, and then drawing without looking at that and stylizing your character, but having a better understanding of, you know, which way the leg goes and which way the arm goes and things like that. You can even shade back here and make this look, you know, more recessed into space. So that's the other thing to remember, is that you can just use the shading to push the forms around and make certain things come out closer to camera. Likewise, you could, you know, if you got a lot of shadows over here, you might say you're doing some buildings or whatever. You could throw a building right here and shade over here behind this arm, and you can make that arm pop out towards the viewer as well by using good use of your shapes of shadows and things. So hopefully this video is beneficial for you and taught you a thing or two. If it has, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Always helps me progress the channel and keep doing what I do here. There'll be links in the description box below for my other course content. I've got some video courses on Udemy and on Gumroad where you can take my how to improve your figure drawing and stuff like that. So all support is welcomed and appreciated. So as always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.